The views and opinions of this program are those of the hosts, guests, and callers. There is substantial risk of loss in trading futures and options, which you should carefully consider prior to trading. Well, as we closed out the week of trade on Friday, we found some good support in the grains and oil seeds. In fact, getting December corn back to that $4 psychological level. Who would have thought we would have done that after Tuesday's big yield and acreage moves by USDA? Soybeans, the upside leader on Friday. A little bit of green in wheat. Mixed action in the livestock trade that did turn higher in cattle into the close, and that helped hogs as well. We're going to run through things and get thoughts, analysis, and perspective here on the show today. Joining us, a new face for the Market Talk family, but someone who has definitely been involved in the markets for a long time. He is the senior grain and livestock analyst for Comstock Investments. Brian Grady joins us here on the show today. Brian, it is great to have you with us and connect. Hope all is well.
Absolutely, all's well, and thanks for having me. It's great to be on. This will be an excellent opportunity to talk markets here.
Yeah, well, and you're so knowledgeable with these markets, and so I think it's fitting to have you on here as we close out what really was a volatile, pivotal week, I think, for the markets here in 2025. And I think just to start, USDA numbers, of course, Tuesday they came out. I think a lot of folks did a double, triple take at the corn numbers. Markets reacting, digesting these numbers. What's your feeling now as we close out the week of trade and how we've digested all of that USDA data in the grains, Brian?
Yeah, first, we knew that these crops were going to be big. It was just a matter of how big. And in the case of corn, it turned out to be even bigger than what was anticipated by quite a long shot. And so not only record yield, but record production and just blowing everything out of the water. And that was the big takeaway. But within that, the huge acreage jump of over 1.9 million acres and harvested acres and just incredible. Caught the market left-footed on that one. And then on the soybean side of things, kind of the opposite there with 2.4 million acres down in the harvested area. The yield was a record. Production was actually down because of the acreage impact. And so when all's said and done, we knew that they were going to be really big yields. We knew the production was going to be really big. It was the acreage that sold the show, so to speak. And the interesting thing there is that in June, USDA gives us an acreage estimate. It's just that when they factored in all the certified acreage numbers from FSA here in August, it gave those big swings up in corn and down in soybeans and just caught the market by surprise. And you think back over the years and we used to incorporate the FSA acreage data in October. And that's when, that had a dynamic shift potentially. And then it moved to September briefly, and then it's been August the past couple of years. And so that, what we have on the acreage side now is known. It's yield from here forward.
And obviously we're in the home stretch and we still got a little ways to go to finish off this crop. And I know we got next week's crop tour is going to give us a big look at things. We can talk more about that here a little bit later on. I think about this though, corn, all said and done, who would have thought with that big shift that we would essentially be near unchanged on the week at Friday's close, Brian?
Yeah, absolutely. Great rebound in the corn market because it was on the ropes earlier on, immediately after the report. Big negative reaction, but bounce back. And soybeans is a large reason for that. And immediately after the reports, I said it's going to be a clash between the two. Who's going to win? Is it going to be corn or is it going to be soybeans? And when all's said and done, I would say soybeans came out the victor here and helped the corn market rebound. Part of that's probably because we already knew that it was going to be a big crop, and all USDA did was confirm that, just more so than what the market anticipated. But the other thing is the funds were so heavily loaded up on the short side of the market. And sometimes when the reaction in markets to the data is very telling. And I think when we get a neutral or maybe even positive reaction to bearish data, potentially signaling lows are in place here as we move forward. Now, it wouldn't be unusual to see an early seasonal low in a big crop year. The market tends to know about big crops much sooner than they do when there are years with crop problems. And in those years, we get our seasonal low typically later. Those big crop years, when the market knows about it early, we typically get an early seasonal low.
And I think in the backdrop of corn and soybeans here is a tale of two different stories when it comes to demand. I mean, corn demand has been on fire here, Brian, while soybean demand, not so much. And we can get into that in a second. But on the corn side, I think that's something that's helped underpin this market to some degree. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've seen the new crop sales just explode here recently. It's over 7.1 million tons of new crop corn sales in the past 3 weeks combined, and just a big jump in demand there. And so what it does is it signals that global end users see value at current levels. And so when we're down near $4 or below it a little bit, that's a value buying opportunity for them. That's clearly what they're signaling. And so we'll see moving forward how long we can maintain that pace. Probably not likely at this rate that we've seen the past 3 weeks, but definitely I think is a story moving forward. Soybeans, the exact opposite. And we haven't seen China in for booking any new crop soybean purchases from the United States. Instead, they've been booking fall shipments from Brazil, even though the prices are more expensive. And that's a clear signal that China has probably told its end users, until we get some kind of a deal with the United States and Washington, the Trump administration, however you want to label it, that you should probably buy from other sources. And it's not just on soybeans. They don't have any new crop corn on the books either. And then China wasn't anticipated to import a whole lot of corn in 25, 26, but none from the United States right now. They don't have any wheat on the books. Once again, not expected to import a whole lot there. Sorghum, they don't have any of that on the books. They haven't bought any new crop purchases from the United States of anything. And so clearly the trade issue is something that has to be addressed. And we got that 90-day reprieve, so to speak, as Trump agreed to push kick the can down the road, so to speak, for another 90 days into early November. And so that one will be addressed again. I think the concern on the soybean side is that once we get to September, October, November timeframe, that's go time for soybean exports, and they're lacking right now.
Well, and to that point, I think it's, records go back to 1999. I mean, this is the latest that we haven't seen China in the market yet for U.S. beans. And, we had the president's True Social post on Monday, essentially calling for China to quadruple its soybean purchases and all these things. But, at the end of the day, to the point you made, China's got other sources this time around. This is a different market environment than it was in the first trade war or even back into the early 2000s. I mean, Brian, this is just a different setup we have right now, isn't it?
Absolutely. And, you think back to the first trade war, and we found a home for our soybeans outside of China. And I think we'll do that to a degree again. The crush industry is now record large and building because of the biofuels and all that here domestically. And so we will find a home for some of those soybeans. I think that the key for China isn't necessarily the volume that they take, because we'll find homes for the volumes on the export side of things, on the crush side of things, those two combined, we'll find homes. But China is market, they drive the market. So when China comes in, the market pays attention. So it's more of a price perspective, I think, than it is an overall demand perspective thing when we talk about Chinese demand.
Brian Grady, Senior Grain and Livestock Analyst for Comstock, is our guest analyst here today on Market Talk. How does wheat play into this whole equation? A lot of folks have kind of, put wheat to the back burner. Everyone's been talking corn and soybeans this week, and not so much about the U.S. and the global wheat picture. Anything stand out to you there beyond just the low price environment that we've had here lately, Brian?
Yeah, so new contract lows in wheat as well, very much mimicking the price activity in the corn market with just less volatility. I think that something to watch moving forward is Russian wheat quality isn't great, and that could open up some opportunities for maybe more export demand. The problem with the U.S. and export demand for wheat is that we fall so far down the pecking order there that even if Russia, the world's largest exporter, backs off some on its shipments, there's plenty of others suitors out there to grab that demand. And so the U.S. is going to struggle. Now, with that said, recent weeks, we've seen some pretty good export sales numbers on the wheat side of things. It's just that the market hasn't responded. So wheat is clearly in a follower's role still, and corn being the primary driver of price action within the wheat market.
And it's interesting. You mentioned Russia. Of course, we have the Putin-Trump summit happening in Alaska as you and I are talking, and no one knows exactly what's going to come from that. But it's interesting that you have, Treasury Secretary Bessent there, and I believe the Russian Minister of Finance and others. And so there's been a lot of chatter. Could this be some sort of mineral rights deal beyond figuring out the war in Ukraine and all these different things? And so one has to wonder if there's some sort of trade deal partnership. Who knows? I think there's plenty of unknowns that the market's probably going to be paying attention to as we get into next week, Brian.
Yeah, from a geopolitical standpoint, clearly the focal point. So, if you're going to go in pecking order, it's probably corn and soybean crops, the crop tour, and what the numbers come out of there, and then weather. And then you're going to get to some of the geopolitics and macroeconomic stuff that'll be out next week as well. And so, but, Russia, Ukraine, and all that happenings in the broader picture, that remains a key, I think, moving forward. Relations, global relations, but you mentioned the trade, the mineral stuff, and President Trump, if he's going to get a deal, it's going to be in his favor. I mean, I think we've seen that over the course of time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you brought up the crop tour next week, and I would love just some insight from you, as you obviously spent so many years on the tour. And so, the ins and outs of it. And I think a lot of folks, there's a lot of chatter on social media this past week about the USDA numbers and more, and people saying this crop isn't out there, they're wrong, and all the things. And so I feel like the tour, it's going to be interesting to see if the tour finds this big crop out there or not, as we get boots on the ground, look at what is actually out there. Brian, I mean, talk about that for us. What are you waiting to see here this upcoming week?
Well, the Pro Farmer Tour will give us 1,700 corn samples and 1,700 soybean samples from 7 states in Western Ohio in the far east, all the way to Nebraska in the far west. And so use the data constructively, I think. There's enough haters out there and things like that with all of it. And why would we want to give the market our information and all that? Well, I'll tell you what, the market knows the information. So use the data wisely and compare it to years past and stuff like that. I think that the big thing this year is, can we get to these record yields that USDA forecast? Well, on the corn side of things, we better see record or close to record ear counts coming out of Pro Farmer Tour. We better see record or near record grain length coming out of Pro Farmer Tour. We better not have a lot of issues with the tassel wrap stuff. And I know that got a lot of attention on social media this summer, how widespread that is and those types of things. So that'll be the key data, I think, coming out on the corn side of things. On the soybean side, we better see a very heavily potted crop. And Pro Farmer doesn't estimate yields in soybean fields with their data. So that's it's a 3 foot by 3 foot square number of pods in that area, and the pod counts better be very high. Now, last year, when I was still associated with the tour, we had very high pod counts when we went through it in mid-August, and from that point forward, it basically didn't rain and got very hot and a very poor finish, and plants just didn't have the energy to finish and hold on to all that yield potential that was out there at that point in time. This year is going to be different. We have plentiful soil moisture in most of the areas. The forecast for the next 10 days to 2 weeks looks relatively benign after we get through this little bit of heat wave. And actually, the heat's probably going to be beneficial for some of the development of some of the crops in the areas that do have plentiful moisture. And so I think that the finish this year is going to be really strong. unless the one thing I think that we have to probably watch, and I haven't seen this in any of the outlooks, is those temperatures once we get to September. Do we have an early end of the growing season because of a frost or freeze? And so we haven't talked about that for many years because we've had extended growing seasons. So if any of that comes up in September, then it kind of changes the game. But how heavily potted is that crop? And does it have a record yield factory, so to speak, with all those pods? And that'll be the critical one on soybeans. The other thing is it's been a really wet year, as you know, across the Corn Belt in general. So maybe white mold, there might be some talk of that. We'll see maybe some pockets of SDS. I doubt if there's much of that, but the disease pressure, just to see if there's any level of serious concern on that front. And those are probably the key takeaways as we move through next week with the tour there.
Yeah, I appreciate the perspective on that. I do want to make sure we talk livestock. Cattle, here we are, more volatility. Big down day Thursday, Friday, late session. We rally in futures, find good support into the weekend. I know USDA Secretary Rollins announcing more funding and a new sterile fly facility to fight screwworm in Texas on Friday, things like that. But, this cattle trade, I've almost run out of things to say about it, Brian. I'd love just your take on what we're seeing here and just all the continued volatility right now.
Well, I'm going to give you a little bit of historical perspective. I think the cattle market is the most dynamic that I have covered within my almost 30 years in the ag markets. And it's just been incredible. It's been so resilient. We've seen buyers show up under the market just on cue every single time that we've seen a break, and we see some sort of little technical action or price action that tells us, hey, maybe this is it. Maybe this is the top. And it hasn't been. And I would have told you at the beginning of the week that we were probably going to run to new highs, and we didn't get there this week. The New World screwworm stuff kind of derailed that speculation that Secretary Rollins was going to announce the reopening of the border or dates when the border was going to be reopened. That tripped up the market, especially on midweek, Wednesday, Thursday, that type of stuff. But then when she got to the announcement around noon Central Time here on Friday, you know what? She said the border will remain closed as long as needed. And then the market had relief buying into the end of the session and into the weekend. And so it looks like as we sit here on Friday, we're probably going to make a new high next week, but who knows? Just across the cattle market, it's been incredible. Not just the futures, not just the cash, the box beef, everything about it has been absolutely incredible. And the other thing is that doesn't get talked about a lot is that the packers have been upside down on their margins for a long time, and they just can't get it, rectified. They are doing everything they can. They're cutting back on their slaughters. They are just absolutely everything they can, and it's inflating beef prices because of the slowdown in production, which is helping their margins to some degree, but they're having to chase after the animals and the cash, and that's keeping them underwater. And it's absolutely just dynamic situation in the cattle market.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, too, cattle have even helped to support hogs a little bit here and there. At least on Friday, it kind of seemed that way with October taking over as the lead month futures contract on Friday, Brian.
Yeah, so big discounts already baked into the fall and winter month contracts. So October, December, February futures, big discounts to the cash. So they're anticipating that seasonal break. The cash index hasn't shown us that yet. It kind of starts and stops and starts and stops and that type of thing, but it's just generally been sideways. So over the next 2 months before the October contract expires, the traders have pretty big breaks built into the cash market, and we'll see if that comes to fruition or not. But like you said, the cattle market's given us some levity there, but I think the big thing is that we're probably going to see pretty big discounts remain in place in the futures compared to the cash index as we move forward. Just from a seasonal standpoint, we're starting to see slaughter numbers build seasonally. We get USDA's hogs and pigs reports, so an update on that coming up in late September. And so there's some pretty critical data coming at the marketplace. But for now, it's just kind of back and forth with the futures. They run up, they back off, and they run up again and they back off. And we kind of got a period of lower highs but we haven't seen significant lower lows yet.
Brian, this has been a fantastic conversation, and we appreciate it. Of course, we always remember that risk of trading futures and options can be substantial. Final thoughts for folks, anything you would mention or reiterate here on the show today?
Well, USDA printed those big numbers, like we said. The surprises came on the acreage side of things. We won't see changes in acreage. That number is pretty static for both corn and soybeans moving forward. I think once USDA start incorporating the FSA data in August, we shouldn't see major changes there moving forward. Yield, it's going to be yield, and I'm a big preacher of don't focus so much on the yield, focus on production. And we saw that kind of come to fruition this week with the because of the acreage. It's harvested acreage times yield gives you your production, and we saw all that play out already. So now moving forward, you can focus on yield because it's all about the yield. We know the acreage here, and the yield will give us the final production, whether it's up, down, or sideways from where USDA forecast in August.
I know folks can go to Comstock.com for more information. Brian Grady, Senior Grain and Livestock Analyst for Comstock. Good to talk with you, sir. Thanks so much for joining us on the show today, and we'll look forward to talking to you again real soon.
Absolutely. Been my pleasure. Thank you.
Make sure to subscribe to the Market Talk YouTube channel. You can watch our latest interviews with top market analysts in the country, find bonus content, and much more. It's easy. Just go to youtube.com/@MarketTalkAg and hit the subscribe button. Or you can search for Market Talk Ag on YouTube.